verbal sexual harassment as one of the most reported behaviors.
People think that if we don't voice something, it's consent.
Yeah.
If we smile at a comment, it's consent.
You may be okay with something, but there are different boundaries for different behavior. Now, a manager says, hey, you look good in sari, you should do this more often. 2-3 weeks down the line, the manager says, hey, I told you to wear a sari. Now you don't wear for next 2 weeks because I am going to be on leave.
One comment, one emoji, one casual message. And everybody's wondering, is this okay? Is this weird? Should we report this? Corporate India. Gen Zs are escalating everything. Leadership is scared and walking on eggshells. HR is having POSH trainings annually. But the fact is that everyone's confused. In today's episode, we are hoping to clear the confusion and break it down. And I can have no better guest today, a lady who's been with government bodies, who's worked with corporates, and who's working with students. Somebody who's been there and is the actual voice of authority to speak about gender diversity and consent in a workplace. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Sneha Khandekar. And thank you, ma'am, for taking the time out. And I think it's a privilege to sit by you. And it's great how you break myths regarding this topic, which is very important for all generations. And I think she does it perfectly. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to be here. And yes, this is one thing which this particular issue, I mean, one should keep talking about it because
Right.
I think what helps is talking about it and navigating through the grays, what you just mentioned, when it comes to workplace, sexual harassment. And the whole issue needs a better perspective than what may be there at this point of time. And this whole Gen Z thing that you just spoke about is also something new that we see in the workplaces now. A lot more discussion on that. So maybe we should have a lot more discussion around this particular generational
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to start with the first segment, and I've put down certain lines which we all have heard. You've obviously heard more being on the committee. I've been in HR POSH committees, so I've heard a lot of things, and I would want you to help me dissect these. So probably when a certain situation escalates, the person says, oh, come on, we are all adults here, or don't take it seriously, yaar, it's just a joke, or this is not what I meant. So tell me one thing, why do these phrases come immediately after a certain discomfort is expressed? What's your take on it?
Yeah, this is something that we hear quite often. And this particularly happens because law considers verbal sexual harassment as one of the behaviors which is considered as behavior of sexual harassment. And also it's one of the most reported behavior, as you rightly said.
Yeah.
Now, having said this, it also is a behavior which has a fluidity in terms of understanding.
Right.
And this fluidity of understanding that we're talking about comes from different, reasons, or there are factors which impact them. But when somebody says something like this, actually that person is aware that that person has crossed the boundary.
Right.
Right?
He's just saying it to probably cover it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the whole thing boils down to the importance of personal boundary that you share with different people within workplaces.
Yeah. No, that's good. So, I feel that is consent always assumed rather than clarified in workplaces? And from my experience, and I think from your experience also, I think consent needs to be clarified, because people think that if we don't voice something, it's consent. If we smile at a comment, it's consent. But I don't think smiling means that you are comfortable. There can be a lot of layers of hidden, especially in corporates when there are so many layers. There's hierarchy, then now there's generational shifts, then the entire thing of documentation and all. So everybody is just so confused and it's gray everywhere, And I think this conversation is also important because we're stepping into the International Women's Month, although I still feel that although POSH, a lot of people feel that POSH is skewed in favor of women, I think there is a certain section specifically of the reverse also when men feel uncomfortable or file a harassment complaint, and I think we'll dissect that also. But I think getting consent is something which is very, very important, And having said that, I want to come to my second segment, Sneha ma'am, saying that why is the grey zone so crowded today? So this is also I'm going to talk about some real life experiences of people who've confided in me. Of course, will not name them.
Yeah.
But a very recent conversation which I would like to bring up with somebody who says that my team head calls me kiddo and touches my shoulder while giving feedback. I laugh it off, but I don't like it. But otherwise, he's nice. And I was like, I heard so many things in that statement. Like, are you confused, woman? Like, do you like it? Do you not like it? So somebody who makes a statement like this, what's your take on it?
See, this whole confusion that we are talking about comes from the understanding of the boundaries. And what is also important for us to understand that there are different boundaries for different behaviors. So you may be okay with something, but with the same person you may not be okay about other behavior.
Right.
So this whole subjectivity of experience that we are talking about is what people don't understand. And the consent that you just mentioned has to be for every behavior. There are no blanket permissions and there are no blanket denials that we are talking about.
Right.
So I think it's important for every individual, and I'm saying it very clearly individual. I don't want to say men or women.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about individuals, and we need to understand that all individuals share different personal boundaries with different individuals. Number one, they are different and they are different for each behavior. So assumptions that one person is okay with this behavior does not mean that that person will be okay with other, is what creates a problem.
Yeah. So I think as a person experiencing that behavior, how do you clarify it? Like, for example, I'm a person who kind of hugs people when I greet them. So that's a very natural trait which I have. So I may be okay with hugging people, but sometimes when somebody just gives me like a certain, puts his arm around my waist, I will feel uncomfortable. Exactly. So how do I put it across to the person saying ki jhappi pale aur kamar pe haath rakhne mein fark hai? How do you think a person should clarify that, especially in a professional setting where there is hierarchy, there is use of power, it may be a manager or a senior person you don't want to. So how do you draw those boundaries?
So most importantly, maybe through your behavior, you say it aloud, say that okay, I'm not okay. But as you rightly said, it is not always possible in every situation. With a colleague or with a peer, it is possible to maybe say at one point that okay, look, I'm not okay with this. But definitely with your if you're in a boss-subordinate relationship, it is very difficult because the whole power dynamics in the workplace impact people differently. Absolutely. There's a huge vulnerability individual experience in the workplaces. And the layers that we are talking about, when we are talking about these experiences, are because of these power dynamics that exist in the workplaces. So it's not easy to say no. The whole point in the law is the person who is getting into behavior needs to understand how the person other person is receiving the behavior, because it is a responsibility of the person getting into behavior to understand that, not with the person who is receiving the behavior.
Understood.
So I think it's very important for everybody to be mindful of how my behavior is impacting other person, and when you're doing that, you should remember that even within physical touch there are nuances. There are nuances when it comes to that. There is a good touch, bad touch aspect, which is very there. But there is also stereotype biases. So when you say that I do this jhappi, the other person perceives that okay, this girl is okay with jhappi, that means she's okay with this also. So again, a bias and a stereotype. That also influences this. So I think it's a challenge.
It's a challenge. It's actually a challenge because then you have to watch, conduct, and I think that's why I think a lot of like we started the segment saying a lot of Gen Zs are today just documenting and escalating. Because I remember I would like to share a personal thing that I obviously know you since a decade now, and I think when you also came to my organization, and I remember telling you about this senior team member from the leadership who used to keep asking me out for dinner, and I used to keep telling him that let's go for a team dinner. And he didn't get it, and I didn't know, and since he was on the leadership and I had a dual reporting to him, I didn't know how to deal with that situation, and it got very uncomfortable, but I used to just smile. And so maybe now I see, probably I'm a decade older and wiser, and now I see that I should have put my boundaries and said that, sir, I'm not comfortable with these advances. But then you have so many things going on in your head. It's your career, it's the organization. So situations like these can we put boundaries without the fear of consequences? I think that's also a very important issue in the professional circuit. Because क्या होगा ना अगर उसने मेरे को bad appraisal दे दिया or he cuts me out from important things, and such situations have happened.
Yeah.
Like even for my podcast today, there are so many guests who I want to call, but because I have probably, you know, waived off their advances towards me, and they are very important to this podcast, but I can't approach them. You know, because I'll feel that they'll immediately say, what's in it for me if I come on your podcast? So,
yeah.
I mean, it's just a personal thing, but there are so many things, and I think being a woman and being an individual, I think being a girl or a guy, all of us have faced this complexity at least in one professional stint in our life. And I'm happy if people can correct me here, but I think this has happened.
Absolutely, because these experiences are very common.
Yeah.
It's a different matter whether they will get escalated or not. That's absolutely different. Because what you just mentioned, I'm sure you never escalated that.
I never. I only spoke to you in confidence and saying, because see, it was not to the level of a POSH, according to me, you know, because I was like, because then that also comes na kisi ki naukri, because POSH is a very serious thing. So that goodwill was also there at the same time, like, how do I tell this guy I am not interested in having a solo dinner with you?
When you were asking me how do I communicate this boundary, I think it is not just individual effort that is important. It's a culture that we need to build.
Bang on.
Because one individual is not able to do this because of the vulnerabilities that we just spoke about. So it has to be a collective effort, and that is what will build a culture. And if you have right culture, then I think most of these situations at least will be taken care of at a level where we can contain them at a level.
Actually that's so point, you know, like we talk about employee benefits, but employee benefits, employee wellness, culture is not a fun party or a thing. Culture is how every day you live in the system, the kind of behaviors you exhibit, and I think especially for the leaders, I think they are the role models for a lot of us who are either entering the workplace or who are looking at growing in the workplace.
Absolutely.
Coming to which, there's a question which I feel, and it kind of popped up, that you know, now you've got experiences across government institutions, corporates, students, and you have like decades of experience. So what do you feel in this experience, what has changed in today's times?
Okay.
What do you think has changed?
Absolutely, it's a very important question, because I mean, I've been speaking about this particular issue since Vishaka guidelines time, before the law.
Absolutely.
And general, you know, about gender diversity, it has been a very long time. So people ask me, don't you think things have changed? I said, yeah, definitely, things have changed. If I talk about POSH, one thing definitely has changed is there's a lot more awareness.
Is it awareness, or is it, I would say, probably escalation, or what is more? Because I feel कि awareness पहले भी था, लेकिन पहले कोई इतना escalate नहीं करता था. Like somebody else may not feel the need to escalate. The person may be scared. It also depends on the personality. You know, so you feel that people are more aware, or you think people today are escalating it without a second thought?
See, there are two things around this. One is awareness about what exactly constitutes sexual harassment, which was a lot more grey earlier than what it is today. I'm not saying the greys have vanished. Greys continue. But at least earlier, I remember, like, if I talk about 2 decades back, only physical sexual harassment was what was considered as, you know, a behavior. While now people understand that these are other behaviors which can also be construed. So that awareness definitely has increased. Now the escalation aspect that we are talking about has also increased because now, due to a lot of you know, thrust on the compliance, we have structures in place which will take care of these issues, which was not so earlier. Earlier we did not have the mechanisms put rightly in a right spirit, and now we have those things very much there. Organizations are much more cognizant about this. They do understand this as a very critical aspect of culture now than before. So I think all of this has also impacted the escalation. And last and not the least, the younger people definitely escalate more than older people. So there is a generational change that we need.
Because I think older people were, see, like we were, like I'm a millennial, so I was always told, tolerate. But ye thoda koi tolerate karega. Like, why would you tolerate? Like, I don't know about toleration, but I made sure I'm not in contact with a person after that thing. But this entire conditioning which we keep getting from generations, we probably are also probably because our conditioning is such कि रुक जाओ, पहले बात करो, maybe you are overthinking. So that entire shift, because today Gen Zs, so I used to be like, am I giving certain body language signals? Like I told you, I'm a juppy person to everybody.
Yeah.
So if one person is not taking it in the wrong way, why is the other one taking? And it took me a while to understand that people see things from their filters, not yours. Like just because you're nice to a lion, that doesn't mean he's not going to jump on you and kill you, you know? So that was, I think a lot of that has to do with conditioning. And I think, see, Gen Zs also grew up in the Me Too culture. They grew up in the corporate scandal culture.
Yeah.
They grew up where हर चीज के लिए आवाज उठाओ more vociferously. You know, like we were on the internet generation, but probably our Wi-Fi was slow or we didn't use it that much. But today they have grown up in the culture, so they feel that escalation is our right. So, do you feel that in situations like this, somewhere down the line, do you think that they are misusing it? See, because like I said, see, there's a lot of thing on the internet also saying that specifically a lot of Gen Zs are filing POSH on their managers who give them a bad review. So, I don't know whether this kind of a case has come to you, but it's all over LinkedIn, it's all over Instagram. Chalo, Instagram we really don't know, but LinkedIn it's been there.
Yeah.
So, what is this kind of a situation, and is it that because the law is so much in favor of women that women feel that aaj maine हाँ bola, and if she wants to get vindictive with a guy, she will just turn around and throw a POSH on that person? And it will be great if you can just share some experiences regarding this as well.
Definitely. So when we are talking about misuse, you know, there is one thing I think it's very important for us to understand, that if I look at POSH, the purview is very clear. It has to be a behavior which is sexual in nature, which needs to be part of that experience.
Right.
Then only it will go under POSH. Any operational issues are not the purview of POSH. So that is one thing. So while reporting, it's very important for complainants to be aware of this particular aspect.
Right.
Where we are, what are exactly we are. I mean, just because somebody has given me a bad appraisal, am I going to him? What exactly am I reporting? What is the behavior that is reporting? Because every concern that comes to us will have some context.
Sure.
Okay. Now, if we are talking about appraisal and we are talking about POSH experience, then the committee which looks into that will look into the totality of the whole thing and will understand whether it is it is a misuse of power that has happened because somebody has not been agreeable to those advances, or is it that? So committee will arrive at a conclusion, and if they find that the complaint has not been made in the good faith, that's what I usually call a complaint which is malicious according to the law, as a complaint which is not made in good faith, then we can also take some action on the complainant also.
Okay,
Law is very clear on
Okay.
that no, this forum should be used for what it is created, and which is to create safer workplaces.
Absolutely.
That's the whole
absolutely.
intent.
Yeah.
And if you look into the kind of reporting, the data is very clear. There is a consistent rise in the number of cases which are reported. And if you look into the numbers and what is coming out as a malicious complaint, it's not huge.
So there's a consistent rise you feel in the
Absolutely,
POSH complaints,
absolutely.
and how many of these are genuine? So if I had to say percentage wise, how many are genuine complaints and how many are probably vindictive or an office romance gone wrong kind of a complaint?
Hardly 1 or 2% would be that.
1 or 2% is genuine.
No, malicious.
1 or 2 is malicious. That means the rest are genuine complaints. Wow.
Yeah.
With more awareness, the cases are rising up. Shouldn't it be the opposite? Like,
there is more reporting. No? Now what we are saying is, earlier was also these situations were present, but as you rightly said, people were not reporting.
Yeah.
Now with awareness, with the structures in place, there is more reporting. And also what is important, as I told you, the culture aspect with the organizations are emphasizing on is also, kind of encouraging people to take a cognizance. So that definitely is there. And when it comes to POSH, one of the things I've always said is, more number of cases is a positive indicator when it comes to the POSH. Yeah. Because then it talks about two things. One, there is a committee which is in place, which is credible, people feel comfortable to reach out, talk to them, all of that. You also have a management or a culture which will take the action appropriately. So that's how organizations look at more number of cases. So that's not considered as a bad indicator in that sense.
Okay. Any loopholes which you feel are there in the law for regarding POSH which can be tweaked around or whatever, because see, you know the law at the back of your hand. We have an understanding of the law, not as deep, but do you think there are any loopholes which have not been revisited yet and which can be probably re-looked at?
See, from a procedural point of view, there still can be certain things which can be changed.
Like
what? You know, earlier we had Vishakha guidelines and subsequently the law. So what law tried to do was, plug in those loopholes which were there in Vishakha guidelines.
Sure.
Like for example, Vishakha did not actually clearly stated the process. You know, there was a lot of ambiguity in the process, which was clearly stated.
Right.
Now it also, what most importantly law did was putting onus on the employer for the compliance.
Wow. Okay.
You know, so which was very important. In fact, the reason why we have lot more compliance now in place than what it earlier. First of all, Vishakha was guidelines and not the law. So the moment it became law and there was a compliance, the whole shift in was very much there. So that has definitely helped. But yes, what I strongly feel that, you know, the law says any organization having more than 10 employees should have this committee in place. That's what the law says. Now, I always feel organizations having employees from 10 to 50, 60, 70 are very vulnerable organizations.
Okay, and why do you say that?
Because those are very small organizations. From good governance point of view, we don't know how far those things they are putting into place and all that. Many times, promoter-driven organization founded by individuals and all of that. So, the framework of governance is very much not there in those. And those are the places where it will also have these vulnerabilities. And may not be, certain things can be pushed under the carpet. All of those things can happen.
Okay.
I also feel that this law needs to actually address the changing workplace.
Yes, so that's where I'm coming from. How do you think it can adapt? Because there are certain laws are very rigid, like certain companies have ye policy hai, yehi policy rahegi jab tak company rahegi. Even though they want to attract Gen Zs, but they still have those very outdated policies. So similarly, how is POSH adapting to newer, younger workplaces? Because I don't even know where younger companies even have POSH. I'm not sure. Like I am dealing with a few founders and stuff, so one or two things, kar lenge. And I'm like, you have 100 people and you don't have POSH. Like, so somewhere down the line, I think they're like, no, it's all cool. But they don't know that this all cool may not really be cool going forward. But how is the law really adapting itself to the changing culture? Like today there's Gen Z, tomorrow there's going to be Gen Alpha, Beta, Gamma, whatever coming, whatever. So how do you think the law can adapt, and is it time for amendments to be made, and when should the amendments be made and how should it adapt?
So one of the things what usually will happen is over a period of time there will be different, how higher courts are looking into this law and the implementation will also be a direction to take it forward. So even if there is no amendment happening, these different advices from maybe Supreme Court or High Courts are also something which help us look into the law and its implementation differently. Like for example, COVID has impacted workplaces very clearly. It gave rise to virtual workplaces. So there was directions from the High Court saying very clearly, or also monitoring authorities very clearly, that work from home gets covered under law. So there is a clear direction which came, which helped a lot, because most of us were in the virtual workplaces at that point of time, and now it continues.
Now it's continued.
So it's not we are going back to that. So in fact that has also given rise to hybrid workplaces. So you will have both those things in places. So the only way we will see this change being reflected is through these
kind of pandemics in the workplace,
and also the case laws which will come through. That's how the law gets interpreted.
Yes, absolutely.
Particularly, like for example, now we are getting into a gig economy.
Right.
Now, technically the law doesn't address gig economy, but over a period of time, how these conversations will help us shape those conversations in a different way. But we need to address such changing, because this gig economy definitely is giving rise to different workplaces.
So let's jump on to the next segment of decoding harassment, ma'am, because I feel this is very important. And specifically verbal harassment, digital harassment, peer to peer harassment and junior to senior harassment, So let me start with verbal harassment today. So again, real life examples, calling each other darling, sweetheart, boss babe. If you say something, oh my God, making those like a woman's mansplaining, saying, why are you so emotional? I know you're a woman, but stop being so emotional. Making gender jokes in team meetings. So one is, what's your take on it, and does this qualify for a POSH or a harassment? Because see, a lot of people think that harassment is a very heavy word. Like you correctly said, पहले क्या होता था, अगर कोई physical करे तो ही POSH था, तो हमारे दिमाग में भी वो है कि to qualify for harassment, it has to be something very serious. So how do you eliminate the non-serious and the serious part of the conversation? How do you do that?
Yeah. It's a very important question, I feel, because many times there is something like microaggression, which may not always be considered as harassment, but there is a discomfort that you consider. So I have always realized when it comes to verbal sexual harassment and digital sexual harassment, it builds over a period of time. It's not one comment usually would get reported. There is that progressive pattern, or there is a repetitiveness of a behavior, or that consistency in focusing certain comments towards one individual, and they're not generic comments. That is what gets highlighted.
Right.
I can give you one example.
Please, we would love that.
This happened in one of the some celebration that they were having in the organization. So this girl wore a sari. Now her manager says, hey, you look good in sari, you should do this more often. Okay. The girl was fine, Gen Z. She said, oh, thank you, no problem. People understand, people understand what is okay and not okay.
Yeah.
So she says, fine, thank you. Now about say 2-3 weeks down the line, the manager says, hey, I told you to wear a sari. You have not been wearing sari. The girl says, because she's now younger generation, she replies, she says, no, sari once in a while is okay, but I'm more comfortable in what I usually wear. Full stop, right? Another few weeks down the line, the manager says, I've been telling you to wear sari, you've not worn it. Now you don't wear for next 2 weeks because I'm going to be on leave. Now this is what I call as a progressive experience, is that
because she smiled at him at the party, so this Charlie got a thing that he can keep saying this to her whenever, because this is not even crossing, this is violating boundaries.
Exactly. But the first comment was okay, that was not a problem. What there is a very gradual way in which
progression
boundaries get crossed, and then people will say, the first time only you should have said something. But why?
So important,
So this is what creates that grace that we talk about.
Right.
How people need to understand these boundaries, and this is a boss subordinate. It's not peer to peer also. So naturally, the whole impact of the behavior differs.
Right.
And the law is very clear that it is not intention, but the impact of the
impact.
behavior.
It's nothing. It's never intention. It's the impact. Absolutely. So then, finally, this case came to you after this statement, or after this, the POSH reporting. And how did you deal with this?
See, usually verbal sexual harassment, it happens one-to-one. There are no evidences in that sense, and there is no eyewitness to a situation.
Right.
But as I told earlier, the whole intention is to make people understand the importance of boundaries and ensuring that there is no repetition. Because even if when there is an escalation, even the complainants are not looking at anything. They're saying very clearly, we want that person to understand this is a violation of boundary and not to do it again.
Not to take an action.
Absolutely.
So necessarily, so every POSH doesn't necessarily have to generate into an action.
A very serious action.
Yeah,
it can be just a conversation between, it is called conciliation under the law, which is an informal resolution which doesn't
require a serious thing.
Serious actions are not part of that resolution, but it also brings in the importance of highlighting the boundaries. Right, so that definitely can be done in that situation.
So ma'am, I would also like you to take a minute and put a strong message saying that for a corporate working employee, if there is a POSH case against him, how serious does that get for him as an individual?
See, POSH is under a law,
Yes.
right? So naturally,
So the implications, I'd like you to spell it out, because यहाँ वो भी spell करना पड़ेगा, so that people know कि boundaries if we don't maintain, what can be, because sometimes they feel अच्छा चलो हो जाएगा.
Yes.
So what are the repercussions if you cross those boundaries? Is, I think you should probably even clear that out for people.
Absolutely. In fact, there are consequences to behaviors, definitely. And law, if you look at the name of the law, it talks about prevention, prohibition, redressal.
Right.
So when I talk about prohibition, what it means is that these are all punishable offences under law.
Yeah.
So anything from maybe staring to rape, molestation, that's a kind of behaviors I'm looking at,
Sure.
and then the kind of consequences for those behaviors could be anything from warning or counseling or also can be
Termination.
Maximum is termination. But there are things which are there in between also. So I want people to understand that termination is not the only
resort.
right?
Yeah.
That is one. That's a maximum punitive action under the law. What is important to understand that the nature of allegation will decide the quantum of punitive action.
Sure.
That is important. But yes, there is an action. It could be a very minor one as counseling, but it can also be as major as termination.
So that definitely comes in your F check, right? When you go to another organization.
Yeah, absolutely. But what happens is, not always people say this, as part of your red check.
Yeah.
And there are views around that.
Right.
So it can also be depending on how things are.
Yeah.
Because generally also when we say there is a one crime, one punishment.
Right.
If somebody has done something, that already person has been punished for that.
Yeah.
Subsequently, it should not impact the livelihood
Absolutely.
option. So
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
how most of the times the ref check may not include that also.
Okay.
So
it may not include that.
It may not include that also. So and the larger perspective could be this also around that.
Wow. Gray.
Yes, absolutely.
So now we've spoken about verbal harassment. I think digital harassment. Now the problem is here.
Yeah.
Same example I'm using. You look hot today, or you look gorgeous today. When your person is saying this, uski shakal pe dikhta hai, either he's saying it normally or either he's like leching and saying it. But in a digital communication, how do you kind of decipher that message? Ki uska thought kya hai? It can be a normal person saying ki wow, you look gorgeous today.
Yeah.
So that is like totally skewed. So isme person saying it or probably that message, how, so this is very confusing for me. So if you can help me break this entire digital thing, it will probably help me and people watching this, because we live in a generation of emojis and hearts and kisses, but we still want to maintain boundaries. So digital harassment, if you can break down that for us, it will be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely, because digital sexual harassment is, after verbal sexual harassment, one of the most reported behavior currently, if you look into that, because we use technology, social media and gadgets lot more for work now than before. I mean, there is a lot of transition that has happened, the way we communicate in the workspaces, and the way we use social media.
Right.
Like for example, WhatsApp has become almost an official way of communication. So evidences and eyewitnesses, I mean, that is not mandatory. What we also look into is the circumstantial evidences. We also look into the preponderance of probability. We are also looking at creating safer workplaces. So idea is not to punish people.
Absolutely.
Idea is to look into that. So when we are looking into these messages, so one may delete it, the other may have it. We have seen the pattern, like some people will only delete particular messages, the rest are always there. So we look at all of this holistically, contextualize the whole thing and then arrive at a conclusion. That is number one. But other thing I want to also highlight is also the understanding of certain emojis and things like that, right? So other day somebody was telling me the smiley, which the normal smiley emoji that how I understand and Gen Z understand is not same. They understand it sarcastically while I am smiling at them. That's what somebody told me. Now, what is important for us is also to understand this as a uniform understanding sometimes. And just because a younger person is messaging you does not mean that person is like, very, very much into you. That's not always like, because there is lot more casualness in conversations with younger people than it would be with the older people.
Absolutely. So that's the thing, na, with that
Yeah.
that casual conversations. Does it always mean consensual conversations? I think we need to also see that, you know.
What I have also seen, particularly in the digital sexual harassment, again the gradual progression. You know, so generally, hi, how are you? We are okay. And gradually, people start getting into somebody's personal space.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that becomes very, very obvious over a period of time. And then somebody says, but why did you start the initial conversation? You know, exactly what I said earlier. Same thing happens here because there is no such immediate one message which kind of crosses the boundary. It's a very gradual thing, and then it creates a context. And the context could be what has happened in the workplace and what has happened on the digital space. So there is always this combination. So somebody, like for example, I can give you this example. So there was again somebody in the team. She did a very good job. So the manager said, hey, you've done really good, all of that, congratulations. So again carrying it over to the digital space subsequently, that you were really good, all of that. Now what the other person feels is, yes, this is just a continuation of that, but over a period of time that conversation tonality changes, and then it comes, not initially, and then people feel, but why have you been speaking to that person? And the reason could be, okay, my manager hai, मैं क्या करूँ?
Or I'm just being
polite.
I'm just being civil and polite.
Absolutely.
Like कोई मेरे को दे रहा है, I'm just replying to the message
Absolutely.
and being civil. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People are also very creative in using different, every apps or any social media that we look. They have their own, certain things, like, certain ways in which you can use that for safety, or, all of that. Those are there. People use things creatively, or they use certain features creatively. Like for example, WhatsApp, you update a status, right? Now everybody who is part of your contact list can see your update,
Right.
unless you have made a special change in that.
Yes.
Not everybody is not aware about it. Now I remember one such situation where this person kept on putting a status as I like you and I loved your dress and all of that. So the first time she saw that person was so afraid that now the whole world is going to see this.
Yeah.
She goes next day to the office, checks with her friends. Nobody has seen that status, because that person had made sure that it was only visible to her.
Oh.
Now this is how you use features of certain social media to get into such behaviors.
I think it's also very important, because I remember normally in work, when obviously there's a task and you're following up for closure of the task, nobody replies. But the moment you share a story in a sexy outfit, those same people, they are the first ones to comment, looking good, going where? I'm like, thank you, sir. Now can I have an update? So it's so skewed. Like,
Absolutely.
I think although WhatsApp is a professional communication, but still today there are a lot of people who still don't consider WhatsApp as professional communication.
Yes.
Like companies have MS Outlook Teams, companies have Slack, where like formal communication यहाँ करो. Though a lot of us prepare कि हाँ WhatsApp पे भी formal communication हो सकता है, whatever groups or whatever.
Absolutely.
But this is where it is, like I said, it is so confusing. Like where do you do this? And like this real examples which you've said are like quite alarming, I mean.
And what has happened with digital sexual harassment is
The line between your personal and professional life has thinned.
Blurred. It's blurred,
Absolutely.
ma'am. It's blurred. Not even
Absolutely.
thin, it's gone. There is no line.
Actually, and that is
Yeah.
creating more grays, So it's very important to be mindful.
Yeah.
The way workplaces have changed are also from all these aspects. What it was
Absolutely.
there 10 years back, 20 years
Yeah,
back,
yeah.
they're not the way how things are today.
Absolutely.
So the mindfulness has to be a lot more, because we're constantly into cyberspace now than before.
Right,
Constantly we are sharing content on Insta, on things. I mean, everywhere for that matter.
Yeah. Wow. So I think we've covered everything in this segment. We've covered the verbal harassment. We've covered the digital harassment. And very beautifully, I think we've covered the manager to peer and the peer to peer harassment. I think in the peer to peer harassment, probably
Negotiating is easier, right? Because we are at the same level, we are the chai sutta partners of each other and stuff. But I think, manager to think it just gets a little too, it gets a little uncomfortable, and there also the line gets blurred.
Absolutely.
So,
And what happens with manager and subordinate is the implication on your job are very different than what happens in peer to peer.
Absolutely.
So that is the major difference that you can see. With peer to peer, you still can negotiate, you can talk. But yes, you just mentioned sutta break. I remembered one incident.
Yeah.
So this boy was sitting in front of us. He says, but that's where also the whole consent thing and how it gets stereotypically looked at. The boy said this girl came for sutta break for me for last 6 months. I thought she would be okay for this also.
Wow. Just because sutta break
is perceived.
Wow. This
Okay.
is you. This is.
But that is where what we all need to understand is there is a gendered understanding to a behavior. And this behavioral understanding has a geographical context. It also has generational context.
Yeah.
So people who are part of our workplace are socialized differently.
Right.
So the way you look at a behavior is not something the others will look into that, because the way they are socialized, their experiences have told them something different. So their lens of looking into situation is not the way what you would look into a situation. And that is where this whole subjectivity comes in.
wow. No. Okay. Now let's kind of reverse the role. Let's reverse the gender. Okay. Very interestingly, a few months back, there was this article floating on LinkedIn again and on Instagram about a man who had filed a sexual harassment case against a woman. There were memes and there were jokes. It was a serious case, but the memes and the jokes overtook the entire thing. Of course, if somebody even dares to comment on a woman's thing, it will become a national uproar.
It is difficult for women to raise a complaint of sexual harassment is what we have heard. But it is equally difficult for a man also to raise a complaint of sexual harassment, because the larger societal construct that we are looking at does not favor, because men are not supposed to
Your
actually.
conditioning is that men are the ones who prey and the women are the victim.
Even from a sexual aggression point of view, the masculinity, the way it is seen, is also from that. So how can you say that somebody is harassing you? Like, you are the one who is likely to harass somebody. That's the mindset, right? The second thing is, if I look at law is for women.
Right.
The complainant has to be woman as per law. But interestingly, law looks at women to women sexual harassment also.
Wow, okay.
Law does not say that the respondent, the person who is harasser, has to be a man. No, that law does not say that.
Right. It's
The
there.
only reason why we look at it differently is because there is a law separate and we need to speak separately for that. So that can be addressed. So the rest of the two situations where we are talking about sexual harassment of a man by a man or by a woman,
By a woman,
can be dealt by the same.
Have you come across these cases?
Yes, I have. But what I have also noticed is there are, if I look into numbers, they're not very big numbers in that, but men-to-men sexual harassment also gets reported. That's also
That's
very
some kind of a progress, I would say.
Yes,
that also gets reported, because I haven't really seen a lot of men even come out and be that vocal.
Actually.
And like you correctly mentioned in our casual chat before this podcast, कि Bollywood influence बहुत है, like Similarly, like there are Bollywood movies where men have also filed sexual harassment. So I just wanted to understand that.
Is the law also supporting genders rather than just being in favor of women per se?
No, law at this point of time is only for women. I mean, that is what is given. But as I said, within an organization, you have a redressal definitely. Secondly, if I look into the academic sector, I look into the students. The UGC has made their policies gender neutral. So UGC says on the campuses we will look into the boys and girls also as part of this gender neutrality. So yes. These are changes that we will see, and I think over a period of time, the law is still very young.
So, according to you, are we creating safer workplaces today, or are we creating scared ones? Because there is still, like you correctly said, while you're trying to address ambiguity, what is the trend? Because we've seen all sides. We've seen the older ones, like I know a lot of organizations today do not give feedback to a Gen Z without having a third person in the room. At the same time, Gen Zs may just go and speak about anything. So everybody's scared. Everybody doesn't know that even if they are human, it can be perceived as a certain, a certain initiation. So where are we going? Like, are we creating safer? Are we creating scared? Because definitely there is still confusion. It's still being talked about. So how is this entire thing going in which direction?
So, because maybe there is a lot more conversations
Now happening on this than before, people might get scared. I'm not, that's a very typical reaction to any such situation where people feel very uncomfortable, something which has not happened before. My simple take on this is, whichever generation you may belong to, there will always be a framework at the workplace which will govern the behaviors that you will get into, right? And these behaviors, that particularly the ones we are talking about, whichever generation again you belong to, will have to rely wholly on the consent aspect. So what you just said, that managers would want to have somebody as, which is fine. See, everybody needs to be safe in the workplace. So that is simply okay. I have no
That is a
objection.
workplace
Safety angle, which I'm okay with. I think the communication that we must have with all the stakeholders should be to ensuring that they understand this consent aspect. Because if we do that, which will re-emphasize the whole importance of personal boundaries.
Absolutely.
We need to help them understand the importance of these personal boundaries and respecting these personal boundaries. I think the respectful workplaces is what we should look at, rather than safer or scary.
Absolutely. I think I second that we should look at having respectful workplaces. And I think everything a lot of it gets covered under respect.
absolutely,
You know.
absolutely.
So, okay, I think before we kind of go to our concluding segment, I remember one thing where you mentioned the other day saying the impact harassment creates on the family, and you also gave me one example. Would you like to throw that it's not only restricted to the individual, but the family also gets affected in something like this?
Absolutely. See, we have to understand that generally the whole experiences of sexual harassment impact in different ways. So, when I'm talking about impact on the individual may experience, there can be physical certain symptoms which will, because one feels very anxious, one feels, there are physical implications of that experience sometimes. There are implications on the mental health, the trauma, the experiences of sexual harassment complainants many times talk about this trauma, that I feel very uncomfortable, I feel very, I feel very anxious because I have to face that person again and again. So there is a mental trauma to that. The third angle is the impact on that person's personal life. Like other day I had a complainant who was receiving inappropriate messages from her colleague, which was accidentally seen by her husband. Now, because the husband saw that, it created some issues between the husband and the wife, where she had to actually had to tell him repeatedly that there is no two-way communication, reciprocation, but this person is. So, that definitely impacted her personal relationship. Even in the house, you may have joint family, you have other family members. It impacts. I remember one girl once, as part of my conversation, her husband was working in some other country, so she's staying with her in-laws for that matter. So, this manager would keep on, getting into these conversations digitally, all of that. So she had to be so conscious all the time about what is happening to her on the phone, all of that. She cannot talk, all of that, because people were her in-laws and otherwise people were, her husband is not here.
So she's probably...
Yes. So, she had to be so, she was so traumatized with all of these experiences. On the top of it, that person was her brother-in-law's friend. So, all of, the social impact, this person I remember her telling me that, you share your tiffins, no, at a time. So, she had got some biryani once. So, this person said, you have to get me biryani every day. She said, then, it was a bigger problem, but then she said, my mother-in-law started asking me that, why are you taking so much of food every day? It was impacting her conversations at home also because of this thing, So, my point is simple. There is an impact of sexual harassment on an individual, and of course there is an impact on the organization also. In fact, nowadays organizations consider this as important part of risk management. because it's also the credibility or the brand value of the organization which gets impacted if there is anything.
But tell me, ma'am, do all you're supposed to report POSH cases also, right?
Yes.
Do all organizations honestly report those cases?
They are supposed to. See, every year under the POSH Act, you have to file annual report to the
But
monitoring
what if
authority.
they skip it from the annual report? Which will you ever know?
No, we will not know unless the complainant or respondent talk about it.
Okay.
So
have there been cases like this?
Fortunately, at least with the organizations I have
They
been
have
working,
adhered to it.
adhered to it. But yes, as I told you, what I earlier said, organizations from 10 to 50
10 to 50
are the ones which are, according to me, very, very vulnerable from this
All
kind of
angles,
situations.
Wow.
Definitely.
I think that was an insightful conversation, and I think there is a lot more we can just continue and talking about.
I just want to just highlight one thing, that all this conversation that we are having is only about organized sector.
Right.
There's a huge unorganized sector women working out there who actually need workplace safety also. So we are only limiting ourselves to this corporates.
It is so skewed. Like I know in corporates, I think, so I knew that POSH, every employee has to do POSH. But the eye opener is when I realized that even the housekeeping staff needs to do POSH.
Absolutely. So I remember there was somebody who obviously came and in Hindi was doing POSH sessions for them. And for months I was like, see, again, conditioning. The first thought was like, yaar, inko kya zarurat hai POSH ki?
Yes.
But then when the lady broke it down to me, she said, you know what? They also need it all the more. You don't know the cases in this sector which don't come out.
Yes.
You know, so that's when I realized that it is not only skewed to it is about an individual, and it is not corporate, but it is workplace safety. You know, like if I have to just widen it, because today you may not necessarily be in a corporate job, but if you're doing any other job, you should feel safe. And there's even people around you should kind of feel safe. So that's when it was, and this was like, okay. I was like, ye kya tha? So there was a sudden shift and it just widened my horizon about how important and how sensitive this topic is that everybody needs to know about it.
Absolutely, and that is part of the definition of workplace given by the law. So it's not only employees, other people who are part of the stakeholders are also covered. So that is why it is very important for us to look into this aspect also. So unorganized sector is huge, and even if I look into currently, we have almost 43% of women in India who are working.
Right.
Which is a good number. All of them need this whole safety needs to be there for them when they are working.
Wow. No, I think this is anyways, I think this has been very insightful, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to kind of comment. You can DM it to me also if you don't want to put it here. And I'll make sure that I get Sneha ma'am to answer these questions, because I think the more clarity and awareness we have about this, the better it will help us in functioning and navigating this. Because trust me, dear Gen Zs, dear freshers, dear Alpha, workplace is not as rosy as you think. It's not as cool as you think. We are walking on a bed of roses, but those roses have thorns. And I think this is something which we definitely have to navigate. And I think for conclusion, probably, I would say if you have to tell me 3 things for any individual entering a workplace to understand the gray zones, what are the top 3 things they must kind of keep in mind, and how do they understand this?
See, the first thing, they should be mindful about understanding which are the behaviors that will fall within this purview. That is the first thing.
Right.
So from an information point of view, they should be aware. The second thing they should be clearly aware about is the need to understand the unwelcomeness of a behavior, which is what is connected with the boundaries that we are talking about. And the third thing I would say that it is better to be conventional than adventurous in the workplaces.
Work is not your entire life. And you know, I've actually done a reel on this. India ranks globally the 2nd highest in workplace affairs.
I have not touched the consensual aspect.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know whether it's consensual, but it's crazy that people make work their entire life.
Absolutely.
And there is a life beyond work. I realized that a little late in life that
काम के आगे भी कुछ करो, जाओ, अपना ख्याल रखो. But otherwise also, I mean, I would still feel office is, I know it's convenience that if you meet somebody in the workplace only, it's convenience. But you need to look at the underlying areas also, which are gray and which can be black for you also, and it will have repercussions.
Absolutely.
I mean, somewhere or the other, it will have repercussions. If not this,
Even consensual
Yeah.
relationships have repercussions. So why
Absolutely.
Nestle CEO had to step down?
Exactly. We have many live cases. And like I said, this is very interesting. Any other questions, any other doubts, please comment. We'll be putting this up on YouTube. We'll be putting this up on LinkedIn also. And Sneha ma'am is very active on LinkedIn, so she'll definitely answer all the questions. And ma'am, I think this has been a very great conversation. And personally for me, I think the more I talk to you every time, there is a certain learning, there's a certain awareness, and there's a certain aha moment, because there's so much more deep. You know, it's not just a surface, there's so much more deep. And I think this entire thing of consent itself is like probably a sea, which keeps on going deep with layers. So thank you so much. And I'm sure people will look forward and to this conversation a lot many. And if we have a public demand, I'll bother you for another podcast session as well.
anytime.
So it's been great, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for speaking.